Welcome to the Mission First People Always podcast. We're glad you're here. And now our host, Dr. Mike Patterson.
For me and many of my listeners, moms are some of the toughest, most resilient, hardest working leaders we know. My mom, my wife, and my daughters are all wonderful examples of this. You probably know some too. They're incredible team builders, mediators, and relationship masters who are always ready to step up, step in, and take charge. But moms are pulled in a lot of different directions, especially moms with young children. In the workplace and in the home, they're always expected to perform at high levels with never enough downtime. In fact, there's just never enough time. And that's tough. If that's you, this episode is for you.
Welcome to the Mission First People Always podcast, where we talk about better business results, stronger teams, more successful careers, and happier lives. Along the way, we hope to bust some biases, build some bridges, and have some fun. We're glad you're here. And now, our host, Dr. Mike Patterson.
I'm Dr. Mike Patterson, your host of the Mission First People Always podcast, where we talk about what it takes to be a great leader and how to build great teams. And we showcase some incredibly talented people who care deeply about good leadership and healthy organizations, just as I do. And today is no exception. My guest today is Dr. Ann Welsh. Ann is a clinical psychologist, executive coach, and consultant. She began her career at Harvard before opening her own practice with a focus on supporting women in STEM, healthcare, and law, and working parents across career sectors. Her coaching brings together research and real-life experiences to hone leadership skills, improve relationship intelligence, and create work-life integration. Dr. Ann Welsh, welcome to the Mission First People Always podcast. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
And you're talking to me from beautiful Boston, and you have 4 children that are going to come charging into the door here in just a little bit. So I'm glad you were able to work in some time for our conversation. We're cleverly calling this episode Lead Like a Mother. So I'm excited to see where we go with it, and I'm sure it's going to be a very valuable conversation for many people in the audience. So before we jump in, Ann, tell us your story. What got you interested in this work, and what keeps you engaged?
Yeah. So, I'm a clinical psychologist by initial training, and I started out my career researching, and I started looking at the transition to motherhood simply because I really liked looking at transition points in people's lives and how they navigate change, whether that was starting college or getting married or having children or career. And so I started researching this area. I didn't have any kids of my own at the time. And spoiler alert, researching the transition doesn't make the transition any easier. I eventually did have my own kids. And after kid number 2, I was working at Harvard. And in what had been my dream job, doing student mental health, I really enjoyed it. But I found that I couldn't parent the way I wanted and do that particular job at the intensity that I needed. And so I asked for some flexibility and was told, no, these are the conditions of this job. 300 people are waiting in line to take it. If you don't like it, you can leave. So I left and I started my own practice. And in that practice, I started focusing on clinically working with new mothers as well, and kind of over time added executive coaching. And then a couple of years ago, also added in some consulting with companies trying to help them retain working parents and create cultures where parenthood was a valued asset of their employees. So kind of doing it from a bunch of different angles.
Well, we're certainly going to explore your current work and what you're doing to help people. But before we go there, let me just give you my take on why I think this conversation is important. And Ann, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. So here's why I think we ought to be having this conversation, because moms are the hardest working people I know. I know when I look at my wife, my mom, who at 86 blows me away in terms of how much she still does. My daughters who are raising kids, they're all incredible, not to mention all of the women I've worked with over the years. So I am in awe of what these women do, but they also have to juggle uh, these demands of heavy duty careers with their family responsibilities in ways that make me wonder how they do it. And in truth, though, some of them might be wondering how long they can keep doing it. They feel like they're sprinting through a 26.2-mile marathon and it feels impossible. Am I getting it? Is that the issue?
I think, yeah, 100%. And I think that's a great analogy, right? Because there is this sense of every day can start to feel like this battle, and you get to the end of the day and you're totally worn out. And then you just have to do it all over again. And there's kind of no end in sight because the to-do list is never done. And I think what ends up happening is that a lot of women either do burn out and have to leave, or are really unhappy and maybe end up in my office as a therapy client rather than a coaching client, because they've just gotten to a point of it feels unfixable.
So what do they need? Let's say you connect with one of these women who feels this way, but they're not at the end of their rope yet. What do they need from someone like you? And then maybe more importantly, what do they need from their colleagues, coworkers, managers, and organizations? What do they need?
Yeah, and I think those are two really important questions, right? Because it is that they do need things individually, but also kind of work culture needs to shift. So to answer the first part, what do they need? What do we work on in, coaching or even in therapy? And part of that is starting to recognize that it is actually impossible to parent and work perfectly. That the expectations that they have of themselves or that other people put upon them are simply too high. And they have to start to figure out where they're going to kind of intentionally drop the ball or put the ball down and start to set boundaries around what they will and will not do. And that's true both at work potentially with projects and true in how they parent. And so sometimes that's saying no, sometimes that's saying it's okay to ask for help, whether that is from your partner or extended family or hiring in help. And also that it's okay to need to say no to things simply because you need a break or you need some time to recharge or to do something to take care of yourself. And, to go a layer deeper, one of the things that I'll work with women on in terms of how to make those choices is to start figuring out what their values are and what they want. I think part of what happens in the kind of course of working motherhood is that there are so many things to do, you stop asking what I want. And it can get so bad to the point of I don't even know what I want for dinner, let alone what I want to do with my life. And so we have to start practicing tuning into that internal voice of what do I value? What do I like or not like? What do I enjoy doing? What am I good at doing? And how can I make decisions that align with that in terms of how to spend my time? And again, both at home or at work.
And I imagine that's a really difficult thing to do for high achieving, well educated, competitive professional women to say, it's okay not to be perfect. I'm going to intentionally drop this ball. That's got to be one of the hardest things in the world for some women to do, some people to do. And so I'm just interested in how you convince Superwoman to to drop something. And then the other piece that I'd like you to explore with me here is How do you have that conversation with your manager? You're an executive in a organization. Uh, there's a lot of opportunities you've been given and a lot of responsibilities you've been given. How do you talk to your boss about, well, I'm going to choose not to do this one and I'm going to drop the ball on that project? I don't think that's exactly what you mean, but how does that all play out in reality?
Yeah, yeah. Again, both good questions. And I think you're really on to it when you say like this is a really hard ask of women to put stuff down. And it doesn't feel good. And I'll put myself in that camp, right? I hate saying no. It's still an exercise that I'm working on. It's not something that comes easily. And I think what I help um, women or really anyone struggling with this to see is that if you're saying yes to everything simply because it's being asked of you, you are still saying no somewhere else. And you have to be aware of that. So if I say yes to every project that my boss throws at me, fine. I am then saying no to something else, exercise, time with my kids, sleep, my health, right? I mean, that no is coming somewhere because there's a limited amount of time in the day. And if we don't intentionally drop balls, we usually end up dropping them unintentionally. And isn't it better to pick and choose what we put down than actually completely fumble and maybe drop a ball that's glass rather than a ball that's rubber, right? Um, so that's going to part A is starting to look at how are we going to make choices and to think of it as making a choice, not as failing, choosing to put a ball down, not dropping it. And I think that even though it can seem like semantics, that's a big difference. To answer your second question, how do you have that conversation at work? Well, I think it looks like some degree of honesty about what is being asked of you and getting your manager to kind of help you prioritize time. And so maybe that is a conversation with your manager of, you asked me to do X project by Friday, and now you're also asking me to do Y project. Realistically, those two things can't both happen by Friday. Which would you like me to prioritize? Right. And so kind of some honesty around what you're being asked to do and how you can actually make it work within some degree of reality rather than just kind of blanket, yes, of course, I'll take that on, I'll take that on, I'll take that on as well.
Are managers getting it? I mean, the way you're describing it, it makes perfect sense. But when you're in the workplace, the demands are great, the pressure's on, we've got deadlines, we've got to hit the numbers. And one of my team members comes forward and says, I can't do this, or can you help me prioritize? I can't do it all. Are managers receptive to those conversations? Do they get it?
I think good ones are, right? I think that's what, a lot of the times when I'm working with leaders is, and doing more consulting work or coaching with them, it is around that piece, right? And similarly to what I was saying about individual women, if you don't put something down, if you don't set boundaries, if you don't occasionally say no, you will burn out and you're going to drop something anyway. The same thing is going to happen at work if managers aren't able to say, okay, let me help you prioritize, or does this feel doable for you? You end up with employees burning out and leaving, whether that's because of mental health reasons or because they're miserable. They leave if they can't keep up with what's being asked of them. And so what I encourage managers to do is to have those conversations and to cultivate a culture of respect and trust at work that your employees want to do well and they want to succeed. And they can only do that in a way that feels sustainable. It's one thing to say, hey, we've got a crunch time, we've got a deadline. It's the end of the fiscal year, all hands on deck. We need 60 hours of work from you this week or this month. But then there needs to be a trade on the other side of it. And I think what sometimes ends up happening is there's never anybody taking their foot off the gas. It's 60 hours a week permanently. And that's not really sustainable.
So Ann, I'm going to ask you to take on a different kind of client, not your normal client, but an executive who is seeking your advice in terms of how to be a better leader for a very large, extended team of people representing all demographics. Certainly, a number of hard charging working moms are on the team, but there's other people on the team as well. How do you advise me, the executive, to be a better leader to my super moms and everyone else, knowing that everybody's got to balance something?
Well, I think that's just it, right? Everybody's got something outside of work. We are all human beings and bring that to the table when we show up at work. So maybe you don't have kids, but you've got an aging parent you're taking care of, or your own health issue that you're dealing with, or I don't know, you have a hobby that just really brings you a lot of joy but takes a lot of time. Maybe you're training for an Ironman. Whatever it is, everyone has commitments outside of work. And if we're allowed to be human and give those commitments time and have needs outside of work, we're going to show up better. We're going to be more engaged at work for having had that time outside of work. I mean, just from a cognitive psychology background, I think I would help that leader just with some education around the fact that you can't sustain an intense cognitive pace of work for very long without breaks. And so if we allow for that time away, and I'm not talking about vacation, but even breaks every, hour and a half in terms of deep thinking, cognitively laborious work, we're going to be better at it. That time away actually makes us better. And that's actually one of the things that I talk about a lot is the way in which, parenting in this case actually strengthens leadership skills, and the things you learn as a parent are applicable to your leadership at work.
And I want to go there because that's an important part of this, and that I want to pay off the title of our episode here, Lead Like a Mother. I want to know what you mean by that. But I'm also curious as to whether you have found is there a generational perspective on this? In one of my recent episodes, I had an expert on leading the different generations and the differences between the different generational cohorts. So do Gen X women in the workplace who are moms view their lives differently than the millennials? And I guess some Gen Zs might be entering the workplace and motherhood. Do you see any generational sort of perspective here?
I actually just listened to that episode of yours. And yes, I do think there is a shift. And I would say kind of my younger clients are probably better at this than some of the older ones. But I think part of the difference too is that you're starting to see male parents wanting to be more involved. And I think that the struggle, the gap is that, we need ideally 50-50 participation in parenting, and we're getting still, 25-75, and it's better than it was, but it's not where it needs to be to really support working mothers. And in terms of workplace policy, I'm still seeing a lot of companies where maybe they say they give paternity leave, but they don't actually expect men to take it. Or there's differences in kind of how that impacts careers. Certainly, there's still the data still suggests that men who have children have a career benefit and women have a negative impact on their career. So yes, I think it's improving with the younger generations coming in, and they're kind of asking more of their employees, but I think it's still got a long ways to go.
So what you're saying is dads step up.
And dads are stepping up, but I think they need to keep stepping up even more.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, let's get to the title here and tell us what you mean by lead like a mother? Are there some strengths and leadership lessons from parenthood that we can be leaning into, and as employers and organizational leaders that we should embrace and exalt in some way?
Yes, like 100%. And it kind of this three P's of parenting leadership lessons. And so the first bucket is people skills. And there are things like empathy, teamwork, emotional intelligence, emotional regulation skills, communication. We all know that these are skills that are valued in leadership, and they are skills that actually are kind of impossible to parent without. And when you have kids, and this is true of men and women, there are brain changes that happen that allow for increased empathy and increased emotional communication skills. So they biologically improve with having children. And certainly the experience of taking care of young children builds on those, right? I mean, you have to communicate well and have empathy to parent a toddler through a meltdown. It's kind of a non-starter. And those are the skills that we say, at least we value in leadership. And we know from data make for good leaders. So that's group one. The second is productivity skills. So once you become a working parent, the to-do list is never done. And that's true at work at home. Once you finish a list, there's just another one behind it waiting to be started on. And so, working parents in particular have to become incredibly efficient with their time, persistent, resilient, and they have to, you know, have a lot of tenacity to get things done. So they are incredibly productive. I will joke that if I have 5 minutes, I will get something done in that 5 minutes. I do not have that time to waste. So that productivity is really helpful, obviously, at work. And then the last thing is their ability to be kind of have perspective and be planful. Everyone talks these days about the mental load of parenting, which is a huge issue. We could do a whole separate podcast on that. But it's this idea of being able to hold what's needing to be done and figuring out who you're going to ask to do what, and prioritizing, anticipating needs, multitasking, essentially being the project manager. And again, anyone who's maybe taken kids to the beach can imagine, you got to think about, well, who's going to get hungry when, and what food do I need to pack, and who's got their sunscreen, and where are the umbrellas, and how are we going to get there, and are we going to get back for nap time, right? All of these things are planning and managing a group of people, which are also valuable as a leader at work, right? Being able to think about, well, okay, who's got the bandwidth for X project, and, did, so-and-so already complete this, or do I need to follow up with them to make sure it's done? All of that kind of big picture thinking is really, really important as a parent, and it's really, really important as a leader.
And your beach reference made me think about how good my wife was when we would take all the kids to the beach, and all the things that we would pack when we went to the beach, and how I was the sort of the pack mule who carried all that across the sand. So that kind of brought back some bad memories for me, carrying all that stuff across the beach, but I get your point. And you work with, I want to make sure that my audience knows that you are available as an executive coach. You're a licensed therapist. You're a clinical psychologist, so you do therapy, and you're starting a new group coaching cohort for working moms. I think you said it starts in January. That's interesting to me. Tell us a little bit about why a group session would be useful to a group of working moms. And is it just working moms, or is it working parents?
Yeah. So great question. If for right now, it is going to be just working moms starting in January. And as for why doing it as a group, I do a lot of individual work, as you mentioned, both as a therapist, as an executive coach. And I found that one of the things that comes up in both situations is that it's really lonely sometimes to be a working parent. It's hard to find time to socialize. I think it can be lonely at the top as well as a leader that you don't even necessarily have peers. Maybe at your employer there aren't other parents aren't other working mothers or other working parents, and so I wanted to do a group to allow women to support each other and to learn together and kind of have that accountability almost to one another. And so, I'm women, working mothers who are maybe wanting to feel more balanced, more intentional in their choices, a little bit more proactive and present in their lives and find a little more peace. And we'll be talking about all sorts of skills around um, how to become less reactive, emotional regulation skills, how to set boundaries, how to decrease the guilt and decrease the perfectionism. And we're going to do it all together in an environment where everyone gets it and is kind of struggling with the same stuff.
So you're creating a community where you can have really the kind of conversation we're having today on the podcast, but do it in a collective way, getting everyone involved, having that sense of community. So is it safe to assume you're going to do this via Zoom, or is it in person?
Yep. No, it'll be via Zoom and we'll meet twice a month for 6 months and hopefully make some great connections. And there'll be ways to interact offline as well, or not offline, but I guess in between meetings so that there can be a lot of camaraderie and support throughout the whole period.
I think that's a great idea, and I would encourage my listeners to consider that, follow up on that. All of Anne's contact information is in the show notes, and I think your website, Anne, is aptly named drannewelsh.com. Is that correct?
Exactly.
All right, couldn't come up with a better name if I tried. And you have a beautiful website, so go check that out, audience. Now, Ann, I'm going to ask you to put on your strategic advisory hat here. You've been invited to talk to the vice president of people, or maybe have a conversation with all the chiefs sitting around the big conference table in the executive suite there. And the question presented to you is, Anne, give us some advice on how we can do better retaining and engaging our moms in the workplace. I know I have some clients that where the workforce is predominantly women. I work with other clients where there are certainly many women in the workplace. How can we hold on to them? How can we retain them? How can we get the most out of them and help them have long-term successful careers where they are with us for the long haul? How do we do these things, Anne, keeping in mind everything else they're juggling?
Yeah, and I love this question. I love doing this work within corporations because there are some really important things that they can do. And the first I would say is flexibility of hours, of where the work is done, of how the work is done, and then support that flexibility with the tools and technology that's needed. And so that doesn't have to be completely work from home all the time. But it might be some degree of flexibility of how many days people are expected to be in the office and make sure that that's not wasted time. I can't tell you how many clients I have who go into their offices and end up just Zooming from their office all day, and it just feels like a waste. So to make sure that when things are done in person, that there's value and a reason to do that, and that there is support for doing work out of the office. That also includes flexibility about kind of hours, right? And so, some parents are going to have to drop or pick up their kid from daycare at 5 o'clock. That means they have to leave the office at 4 and maybe offline for a few hours while they spend time with their kid. But I bet you they will sign back on at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock after bedtime and do a couple more hours of work. And that has to be kind of accepted as putting in the time. The second piece I would say is to make sure that there is really strong parental leave policies as best you can. I recognize that with a smaller organization that is more challenging, but to make sure it's gender neutral so that both mothers and fathers can take it, that there's an allowance for some sort of graduated return, that people are encouraged to take it. And then the other piece around that is that if you can, as an organization, to offer parental leave coaching, which is another service that I provide, and it's specific executive coaching around that period of getting ready to take maternity leave or parental leave, during leave, and then for the re-onboarding back. And also, within that, I'll do some manager training typically around how to support that individual person. And then the last place, and I think we kind of touched on this already a little bit, but the last big picture thing I would suggest is just creating that culture of care and respect and trusting that, parents, like all people, are putting in the effort and want to do well. And if you respect and kind of trust that, you'll see that kind of repaid over time and with that retention that we're talking about.
And it all comes down to just valuing people for who they are, not necessarily what they deliver in terms of value. They have an inherent value, and their lives are much bigger than just what you see when you see them in the office. So I appreciate that. And if you've listened to the podcast, as my listeners know, I always end with this question. And here it is. I didn't warn you to get you ready for it, but I hope you're ready for it. So knowing what you know and having shared all the great ideas and insights you shared with us today, leave us with one thing that we can do right now that will make us better leaders or simply better people.
I think to show up as yourself. And I think that's true, working parent or anyone. A lot of the work that I do is around, again, figuring out your values, your strengths, who you are, and then showing up as a leader. You don't have to show up as a parent or a leader in some sort of cookie cutter way, that you as a unique human bring value to the table. And when you are in alignment with that, you feel better and you actually encourage everyone else to do the same. And it really is this positive feedback loop.
And that's great advice. And I want to thank you for being a great guest. I have so enjoyed this conversation. I trust my audience has as well. Again, we've been talking with Dr. Ann Welsh. She is a mom who speaks from experience, but she's also an incredibly well-trained therapist, executive coach, consultant to organizational leaders. And she would love to hear from you. Her contact information is in the show notes. It's as easy as going to drannwelsh.com. And don't forget, we do these podcasts to help you be better leaders, to build stronger teams, to be better human beings. And I'm grateful that you have listened today. If you like what you heard today, you think it's valuable, leave a review, tell a friend, subscribe, follow the podcast. That's how we get the good word out about good leadership. So until next time.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you want to create a stronger, more people-centric and empowered culture for your organization, visit drmikepatterson.com.